Yet in the days that followed, grief settled over neighborhoods and church pews like a heavy winter fog. Strangers who had never met her spoke her name softly, as though volume alone might deepen the wound. Candlelight vigils flickered against the dark, small flames defying the senselessness that had torn through a home meant to be a sanctuary. For many in Indianapolis, the case was more than a headline. It was a rupture in the assumption that routine guarantees safety. Doors were double-checked. Porch lights were left on. Conversations lingered longer at kitchen tables, circling around questions with no satisfying answers. And yet, amid the sorrow, there were gestures of grace, meals delivered without request, prayers whispered across denominational lines, and a quiet resolve to hold one another closer. The tragedy did not simply expose vulnerability. It revealed the depth of communal care that often goes unnoticed until tested. Though time moves forward, as it always does, the echo remains. It lives in the stories retold, in the lessons absorbed about vigilance and compassion, and in the enduring reminder that even the most ordinary morning carries a sacred weight. Parents began mapping out new rules for their children. Text when you arrive, call if plans change. Never assume someone else is watching. What had once been instinctive ease gave way to deliberate precaution. The illusion that danger belonged somewhere else, in distant cities or late-night broadcasts, dissolved into a quieter, more intimate vigilance. For many across Indianapolis, safety stopped being an abstract promise and became a daily practice. Neighborhood associations organized meetings. Police forums drew larger crowds than ever before. The language of "it won't happen here" faded, replaced by harder conversations about preparedness and responsibility. Yet beneath the tightened routines and reinforced doors, there remained a longing for the trust that once flowed so freely. People missed the unguarded exchanges across driveways, the comfort of assuming goodness as the default. The tragedy did not only alter behavior, it altered perception, reminding residents that security is not merely about locks and alarms, but about the fragile balance between openness and caution that defines community life. That realization lingered long after the sirens faded. It unsettled people in ways statistics never could, because randomness feels impossible to reason with. If there is no clear motive, no personal vendetta, no warning sign missed in hindsight, then the comfort of explanation slips away. What remains is the uneasy understanding that ordinary life, morning coffee, a quiet house, a routine day, can be interrupted without notice. For the community in Indianapolis, that truth reshaped more than daily habits. It reshaped perspective. People wrestled with the tension between fear and faith, between acknowledging vulnerability and refusing to live defined by it. Counselors and clergy spoke about resilience, about the necessity of holding on to compassion even when the world feels arbitrary and cruel. In time, conversations began to shift from the randomness of the act to the intentionality of response. Neighbors checked in more often. Friends expressed gratitude more freely. The randomness of tragedy underscored something else entirely, that kindness, too, can be deliberate. And while no community can insulate itself completely from harm, it can choose how it gathers in the aftermath, not only in shared sorrow, but in shared resolve to protect, to care, and to remember. As court dates came and went, Larry Taylor Jr. became a name etched into public memory, less as a person than as a symbol of irreversible harm. The verdict delivered a measure of accountability, affirming that violence would not go unanswered. Yet even as the legal chapter closed, the emotional one did not. Justice, in its formal sense, can impose consequences, but it cannot rewind time. For Amanda's loved ones, the proceedings were a necessary but painful passage, each testimony reopening wounds that had barely begun to scar. The courtroom offered structure and resolution. Grief offered neither. There is no sentencing guideline for absence, no appeal process for the milestones missed or the quiet moments that will never return. And so the community learned another difficult truth. Justice and healing are not the same. One belongs to the legal system, measured in years and statutes. The other unfolds privately and unevenly, shaped by memory, faith, and the slow work of carrying loss forward. In quiet living rooms and around holiday tables, her presence would be carried not by sight, but by story. Laughter once shared in real time would be retold in careful detail, each anecdote a bridge between past and present. Photographs would become touchstones, frozen fragments of joy that speak when words fall short. For Weston, understanding his mother would come gradually, through bedtime stories about her kindness, through the cadence of her favorite hymns, through the values she lived by and that others now strive to model. Love, after all, does not vanish with absence. It changes form. It becomes something inherited, something entrusted to those who remain. In Indianapolis and beyond, the family's effort to rebuild would stand as a testament to resilience. Grief does not follow a straight path, nor does healing erase what happened. But in choosing to speak her name, to share her faith and warmth with the next generation, they ensured that her influence would extend beyond tragedy. Loss may have rewritten the shape of their days, yet it did not have the final word on their story. The sanctuary that once echoed with ordinary Sunday worship took on a different tone, hushed, heavy, yet bound together by shared sorrow. Candles lined the sidewalks outside, their small flames wavering in the evening air as prayers rose in unison. What had begun as gatherings of shock slowly became gatherings of support, then of resolve. At Resonate Church, the ministry Amanda had helped nurture, grief and faith existed side by side. Sermons spoke candidly about suffering, about doubt, about the hard work of trusting when answers feel incomplete. The church did not attempt to rush past lament. Instead, it made space for it, allowing tears to be as much a part of worship as song. In leaning into the faith Amanda cherished, the congregation found a framework for endurance. They organized meal trains, counseling sessions, and outreach efforts that transformed mourning into action. The building itself became symbolic, a reminder that while violence can fracture lives, it cannot easily dismantle the bonds formed through shared belief and shared care. In time, the pews would once again hold ordinary moments, baptisms, celebrations, quiet reflection. Yet the memory of those candlelit nights would remain woven into the church's story, a testament to how a community can gather not only to grieve, but to stand steadfast together. In the aftermath, town halls and opinion columns reflected a community trying to make sense of both individual responsibility and institutional gaps. Some residents focused on accountability, arguing that prior convictions should trigger stricter supervision and fewer opportunities for reoffense. Others cautioned against reducing a complex system to a single failure, noting the overcrowded prisons, limited reentry programs, and strained probation resources that complicate oversight. In Indianapolis and across the United States, the case became part of a wider national debate: how to balance public safety with the goal of rehabilitation. Criminologists pointed to research showing that stable housing, employment opportunities, and community support significantly reduce recidivism. Advocates for reform stressed that without meaningful reintegration pathways, cycles of crime are more likely to repeat. Yet for many grieving residents, policy discussions felt distant from the rawness of loss. Statistics offered context but not comfort. The tension between prevention and second chances remained unresolved, illustrating how criminal justice operates at the intersection of law, sociology, economics, and human frailty. It was, as many acknowledged, a conversation without simple solutions, one that demanded both compassion and accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable trade-offs in pursuit of a safer future. Online speculation, though eventually drowned out by facts, demonstrated the double-edged sword of social media. While it can amplify awareness and generate leads, it can also foster suspicion and trial by public opinion. The Blackburn case became yet another example of how quickly narratives can spiral beyond evidence, shaping perceptions before investigators have the chance to establish a clear record of events, particularly in a community like Indianapolis, where residents turn to digital platforms in search of information and meaning. Over time, many reflected on the need for restraint and responsibility in online discourse. Sharing unverified claims can deepen the wounds of those already grieving and complicate the pursuit of truth. The lesson, for some, was not to abandon digital spaces, but to approach them with greater discernment, valuing evidence over conjecture and empathy over sensationalism. For Davy Blackburn, forgiveness became a central theme of his healing process. Whether one agrees with his approach or not, his public stance on mercy reflected the teachings he had long preached. Forgiveness did not erase pain, but it reframed it within the boundaries of his faith, an attempt to move forward without being defined solely by tragedy. That perspective resonated with some and puzzled others. Healing after profound loss rarely follows a uniform path. For many, forgiveness is a private journey. For others, it is intertwined with spiritual conviction and the desire to release bitterness. In Davy's case, his words underscored the complexity of grief, how it can coexist with grace, and how personal choices about healing need not dictate expectations for everyone. Still, forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Amanda Blackburn's name remains attached to conversations about home security, community vigilance, and the unpredictability of violent crime. Her story is retold not to sensationalize, but to remind of the value of ordinary safety, of the impact a single act of violence can have on families and neighborhoods, and of the resilience communities can demonstrate in the aftermath. To speak about such events with care is to acknowledge both the pain they caused and the lessons people hope to carry forward. Remembrance need not dwell on tragedy alone. It can also honor the life that was lost and the efforts to build a safer, more compassionate world. Perhaps one of the most powerful lessons from this tragedy in Indianapolis is the importance of small precautions. A locked door, a security camera, awareness of unusual activity. These simple acts, often dismissed as unnecessary in quiet neighborhoods, can create barriers that deter opportunistic crime and provide residents with greater peace of mind. Such measures do not guarantee safety. No system can eliminate risk entirely, but they represent a practical response to the understanding that prevention matters. Communities that encourage vigilance without succumbing to paranoia often strike the healthiest balance, remaining open and neighborly while recognizing that basic security is part of responsible living. The story of Amanda Blackburn is ultimately remembered not only for its tragedy, but for the conversations it sparked about resilience, about the value of community, and about the ways individuals and neighborhoods can take thoughtful steps to protect one another. To reflect on these lessons is not to dwell on loss, but to honor the desire to learn and improve in its wake. In the neighborhood of Indianapolis, cooperation also played a meaningful role. Neighborly surveillance footage, shared willingly and quickly, helped investigators piece together the suspects' movements and corroborate timelines. Such assistance illustrated how communities can contribute to the pursuit of truth, offering resources and observations that complement professional investigations. In unity, the neighborhood found strength, recognizing that collective responsibility for safety does not replace individual vigilance, but enhances it. The story of Amanda Blackburn thus became not only a cautionary tale, but also an example of how neighbors can support one another in times of crisis, turning shared grief into shared purpose. The emotional aftermath for Amanda Blackburn's family remains profound. Grief does not follow a straight path. It resurfaces in milestones, in birthdays not celebrated, in holidays with empty chairs. Time may soften the sharpest edges, but it never fully closes the wound. Loss becomes something carried forward rather than left behind. For parents and siblings, healing often means learning to live alongside memory, honoring the past while finding ways to engage with the present. Support from friends, counselors, and community members can help, but the journey itself is deeply personal. There are days of resilience and days of setback, and both are part of what it means to grieve. To acknowledge this reality is not to dwell on sorrow, but to recognize the humanity behind the story. Behind every public case are private lives altered forever, and understanding that complexity fosters empathy, a small but meaningful response to the pain that tragedy leaves in its wake. And yet, amid the sorrow, Amanda Blackburn's life continues to inspire. Those who knew her describe a woman driven by compassion, someone who sought to uplift others through faith, friendship, and everyday kindness. In remembering her, They choose to focus not on the violence that ended her life, but on the love that defined it. Such remembrance serves a purpose beyond memory. It highlights the ways individuals can impact their communities through small acts of generosity, encouragement, and service. To honor someone's legacy is not to erase the tragedy, but to affirm that a life carries meaning beyond its final chapter. In that spirit, the conversations surrounding her story often return to themes of resilience and human connection. While grief remains, so too does the possibility of growth, of communities learning to support one another, and of families preserving the values their loved ones embodied. Memory, then, becomes a source of purpose rather than only pain. As we reflect on this case in Indianapolis, it serves as both a cautionary tale and a tribute, a reminder to safeguard our homes and remain vigilant, but also to cherish the ordinary mornings we are given. Because sometimes, it is the most ordinary days that hold the greatest vulnerability. The story of Amanda Blackburn resonates beyond its tragic circumstances. It prompts communities to think about safety, compassion, and the bonds that connect neighbors. It also reminds individuals to value the moments that often pass unnoticed: quiet breakfasts, shared conversations, and the simple presence of loved ones.